of your emotions can make the continents ring. Yet in all your might and glory, vanished from the sky, leaving just another story, missed millions of man-made lives. They tell us how you fell from the sky.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And my guest today is John Zielinski. Hello, John. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
John, you know, I've done interviews from Walpole prisons, but, you know, I felt kind of strange doing an interview with a Leavenworth resident, but I guess that's a town too, isn't it?
When I was a kid, I used to, I was in Kansas City part of the time, and Leavenworth part of the time, and they would say, well, how long were you in for? And yes, no, I used to get a lot of Leavenworth jokes, and over the years it's faded because people don't associate it as much as they did when I was a kid. The federal prison is there, the state prison was outside there, the women's prison was there, the military DB was there, and they have since at Wadsworth, which used to be called the Old Soldiers' Home, they put a private prison. So Leavenworth is ringed by prisons.
That's one of the things that I'd like to get some comments on from you in a little bit. The fact that we have more people in prisons in this country, the land of the free, than any other country right out there, communist country or whatever, even more than China, Red China, who we always hear the bad stuff about. Now you live in Leavenworth. You're a former Leavenworth resident. You're an investigative reporter. You're the author of 22 books, and in the story that appeared in Leavenworth Times, they say that you are. You're a controversial conspiracy theorist who's the subject of a new documentary called Zielinski, which is playing at the AMC Theater in Kansas City on Saturday night.
Right, and now it is actually going to be playing in Hamburg, Germany, in Chicago, in Bellingham, Washington, and so on. And when those two young guys...
Chase Thompson and Ryan Walker.
That's right. When they came to me, I was this old fogey living in a $100 trailer, and they were going to do a 10-minute little thing about me, and they listened, and they said, we got to check some of this out. And it took 3 years for this to mature into that, but I kept digging up the videos of me in 1990 and 91 when I was making programs on Access Television in Iowa City. And I must say that in Access Television in Iowa City, I was ignored. I did a program called America's MIA, Children Missing in America, Murdered in America, which was tied in with the Franklin investigation of the Nebraska legislature. And as you
John DeCamp did that book on Franklin cover-up.
Yeah, the Franklin cover-up. And what I did was, long before DeCamp did the book, I had made the acquaintance of Ted Gunderson, and I'd like to have all of you salute Ted Gunderson. I mean, that
one of my favorite people, FBI director for the Los Angeles area, just died last month, I believe.
Yeah, July 31st. And for almost 30 years after he was with the FBI, and I was periodically meeting with him, he went from someone who said, well, maybe the FBI was okay, to saying now, don't trust the FBI. And this is what happened when John DeCamp, Lauren Schmidt, and the others that were investigating the Nebraska prostitution of boys from Boys Town and so on, they went to the FBI with a story, and the Omaha FBI agent said, you better go back and shut that investigation down if you know what's good for you and your family. And what happened out of that is they didn't want any FBI. And I, with a private investigator who'd been a Polk County deputy sheriff, went from Iowa over to Nebraska to one of the meetings they were having and convinced him that Ted was one of the good guys and he should be brought in. And I didn't know for umpteen years. I just saw it the other day. He graduated from the University of Nebraska. So he was well familiar with the area, as I was, because I was an Air Force historian at Lincoln Air Force Base, which was just right outside Lincoln back in 1960. And this allowed me to know my way around not only Lincoln but Omaha well, and I tried to put my 2 cents worth in, and I actually did a 2.5-hour long radio show with Jan Michelson over WHO Talk Radio Des Moines. I brought in Ted Gunderson. I brought in Dr. Judy Ann Benson-Gerber, one of the foremost psychiatrists in the country, who'd been brought out to testify before the Nebraska legislature. Lee Orr. Again, Lee Orr is a Kansas City homicide detective who said, basically, for the last 5 years of my 25 years in the Kansas City Homicide Division, I've investigated nothing but satanic and occult homicides. And at the same time, Ken Lanning from Quantico was busily telling all the American people, oh, there are no satanic homicides recorded in the United States. And he was only Kansas City, Lee Orr. Unfortunately, Lee died of prostate cancer. He was a great booster, letting people know, letting pastors know about how much satanic activity was going on around Kansas, and he came to speak to the Nebraska legislative people who were trying to reveal all that was going on in Nebraska. And there's a quote on the front poster thing at my film that says, "This is a bigger cover-up than the Kennedy assassination." That is John DeCamp's quote. I said to him, John, this is as big a cover as the Kennedy assassination. And he said, no, John, this is a bigger cover-up than the Kennedy assassination. Now, one of the things that nobody brings out is that you can go and look this up. As a journalist, I never made a statement that I didn't have documentation to back up. And when my film showed at the first film festival in Utah, the Slam Dance Festival, Variety reviewed it and called me a conspiracy theorist extraordinaire. But in 2011, it also showed in Philadelphia at the Independent Film Festival there, and they ruled it the best political documentary of 2011. And by then, the reviewer was saying, and some of the things he said had been proven to be true. So no longer was I a conspiracy theorist extraordinaire, but I was a journalist who'd proven some of his points. Now,
let me just stop you for just a second here and interrupt. You know, because this whole term conspiracy theorist, this is something pretty new. I pointed out on the 9/11. You know, I said, man, George Bush makes me pale to insignificance as a conspiracy theorist. He wants you to believe a few Arabs in a cave in Afghanistan made the U.S. Air Force stand down.
Yes, I know, and I just did a 9/11 piece here. I'm doing Columbia Access Television, and I did a half hour in which I pointed out the other things, and then I used Dave Von Kleist. You know,
I know Dave very well. I know Dave very well. Yes.
And I did their 2-hour-long programs on, and they're repeating themselves on Columbia Access Television. So little by little, I was a conspiracy nut in Iowa, but I am actually, I have some credibility now here in Columbia, that people are watching Access Television, that occasionally I get somebody stopping me on the streets. I was actually at a garage sale when a lady who had seen my film at the True Falls Film Festival here came up and said, can I give you a hug? And I said, sure, fine. What I like is that the school system here in Columbia, Missouri, before that film aired at the True Falls Film Festival, sent to every school around the community a notice that it was there and someone from the school should attend to see what was going on with regard to children. Now, here's the bottom line. More children have disappeared off the streets of this country in the last 30 years, never to be seen again, than all the American soldiers who died from the Revolutionary War to the present. And when we get a bunch of Navy SEALs killed in a helicopter crash, we put this in papers all across the country. But when Good Morning America says on May 6th of 2010, there are 2,500 children reported disappeared every day in this country, no major headlines ensue. And what I have said is it's easy to go to missing and exploited children and uncover the fact that as many as 900,000 children are going somewhere, somehow, and we're not fussing about it at all.
Now, there's, you know, one, just as an aside here, in the last article I put out, I stated in this century alone, governments have killed 170 million people. And that's not counting wars. That's not talking about just the wars. And how many children disappear every year, never to be seen again? How many children? Are we keeping some records on that?
Missing and exploited children puts at a runaway, throwaway, and so on around 900,000. And I'm saying I believe that the U.S. government doesn't want to close our borders for one specific reason. If we don't keep getting a flood of people coming in, sooner or later somebody's going to start saying, hey, this town had so many children and now it has far less. I'm here in Columbia, and I can go to bulletin boards around, and there'll be a bulletin up there for a 13-year-old girl that's missing, or a 10-year-old boy that's missing, and this is happening on a regular basis. Now, in 2000, I wrote for Noreen Gosh, Why Johnny Can't Come Home.
I've had Noreen on my show. Yeah. She actually found her son for a while.
Well, and the point is that when I was going to do the book, I went to the newspaper index. And in the newspaper index, I found there were kidnapped newspaper boys in Omaha, kidnapped newspaper boys in Norfolk, kidnapped newspaper boys in Kansas City, kidnapped newspaper boys in Cleveland, and so on. But the Des Moines Register would never acknowledge, other than, hey, there were only 2 kids kidnapped, Johnny Gosh and Eugene Martin. And yet it was going on across the country, and I say to you, go to any major city in this country and find me a newspaper boy. They're not there anymore, because parents said, uh-oh, it's not safe to let our kids go out in the street. Now, talk about conspiracy as opposed to conspiracy theory. Why didn't the Des Moines Register, and I used to work for Associated Press, why didn't Associated Press pick up the fact that they were kidnapping newspaper boys all across this country? No one told that story until I did Why Johnny Can't Come Home from Noreen Gosh. And he can't come home, and basically because he told his mother when he did come home that one time, they'll kill you and they'll kill me. So we best stay apart and hidden as much as possible. And I didn't just assume that everything she told me was true. It was all verified through the Nebraska legislature, through John DeCamp. They were very open with me and giving me all kinds of records and documents that they didn't make official in the Nebraska investigation, because by the time they had killed 18 people in and around Nebraska, they figured they better shut that investigation down or they were next. And that's the whole point. I have been a legitimate journalist for 50 years. You can go back and find my stuff in the Kansas City Star in the 60s. And yet, when I try to tell the story based on fact, so many people in so many areas want to dismiss this as, oh, another conspiracy theory. No, it's not. It's the facts about what's happening in this country, and if you don't wake up, your kids are next. And what is happening here in Columbia, thanks to that film, is it's beginning to happen. I am, for the first time, stories in the newspaper about me. They gave it in a review 4 out of 5 stars. Variety said, film should be on television, but basically, oh, probably will never get there. And I want everybody to go to franklincase.org and watch the film called Conspiracy of Silence, because they brought the Yorkshire broadcast out of England to document what was happening to the Nebraska legislature and the boys from Boys Town. And DeCamp is part of that film, but so is William Colby, the former head of the CIA. And Yorkshire Broadcast said, if you don't go on camera and tell us this is going on, we're not going to air this program in England. It was aired in England. It was scheduled for the Discovery Channel in 1995, even reported in TV Guide. Then clandestinely somebody bought out the Discovery Channel, and somebody from Congress or multiple congressmen said this film must be destroyed. Now, there was one copy that came to Senator John DeCamp. It was from one of the cameramen, we think. It was not complete. It didn't have all the titling, but he gave it to me, and I went to a friend of mine, and he had the equipment to put titling and other things like that, so we put titling and explanation on it, and I had 100 copies made. Gave DeCamp back the original in a dozen, sent a dozen to Ted Gunderson, distributed the rest around. I was a part of a Patriot group in Iowa. I made sure they got copies, and that film is the precursor to my film, Zielinski. Now, I would have preferred that the two filmmakers call it Let the Truth Be Told, because that's the series I'm doing on Columbia Access Television right now. I'm saying, let's cut the bullshit. Well, I gotta watch what I say. But
not on my show.
You know, what is happening is this is here. Don't necessarily believe me, but go and check my sources. So every time I try to do something like the 9/11 stuff, I refer to Dave Von Kleiss. I tell them that he has amassed in this. I didn't realize he had done a second film. I had seen the first one on 9/11.
In Plain Sight?
Yeah, and the other one was the thing about propaganda and so on. And that second film, he had far exceeded what he did in the first film. He had firemen from New York City talk about hearing boom, 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 you know, going on as they were there on site. Airline pilots talking about it, a whole host of other people talking about it, and it really strains the bounds of credibility. And I've listened to General Parton about Oklahoma, and yet I had a book that I just bought at the garage.
They tried to blame, basically they tried to use me and implicate me into Oklahoma City by linking Timothy McVeigh with the militias that I helped start. ADL tells you that, Clay Douglas started the militia in New Mexico. And I did. They just don't tell you I started it in the governor's office. We weren't exactly a terrorist group.
Right. And no, the thing is...
And by the way, it was William Lewis, I believe, made the film In Plain Sight. He's done a number of films, but Dave worked with him. Dave and Joyce, I believe, worked with him on that, or at least sold it.
Right. And the thing is that Joyce and I both share one thing. She was Air Force, I was Air Force. I was Air Force historian, she was Air Force nurse. But I do know that much of what is going on in this country is being hidden, because what the Nebraska legislature pointed out was that Offutt Air Force Base was being used as a training ground for those kids who were then prostituted to members of Congress. And we should mention...
Isn't that where Bush just flew into right after 9/11? And isn't that where a lot of the executives from that worked at the World Trade Center were on 9/11?
I don't know that for sure, and that's not an area that I'm expert in. Years ago, what happened to me in Iowa is that I was the successful publisher of a line of books called Iowa Heritage Publications. I was publishing not only my own works, but the works of others about the state of Iowa. In 1982, a small-town printer, the Sutherland Printing Company, David and Sutherland, father and son, came to me and offered me their services. We've started a new printing plant. We'll meet or match any bid you can get from any printer in the country. Now, as the publisher of Iowa Heritage Books, I'm nationally and internationally registered. They printed 3 books for me. The second and the third were printed in quick succession, and they mistakenly put their address rather than mine on the book. And the next thing I know, new brochures are coming out declaring themselves to be Iowa Heritage, Sutherland Publishing Company, and underneath in small letters is Iowa Heritage Publications, as if they bought me out. And when I objected, I hired attorney after attorney after attorney. 2 of them packed up and moved out of state. The second one who left said, these people play too rough. I'm not about to go into court. If you don't give this lawsuit up right now, you're going to go to jail. And finally, I'm getting from a businessman in Montezuma, Iowa, 3/4 of this town know those people are in the drug business. The last man that tried to get him was a deputy sheriff, and he ended up sleeping with a .357 Magnum on his belly. When they threatened to kill his family, he pulled up and said, hey, I'm not about to go into court and testify to anything against those people. They would ruin me. And they had gotten to the point of power in Iowa where they didn't need to kill anybody. They just said, you mess with us and you won't work again. And basically they were able to blacklist me through the entire media, through the University of Iowa and so on. I called the University of Iowa Nazi U. And basically Sally Mason, who's the president, has tacitly agreed because she refused to answer anything. As the author of 22 books, I had copyright, ISBN, Library of Congress card catalog number, and none of that proved anything. Now, I took that information about 3/4 of this town to the chief of police of Grinnell, Iowa, Jim Arns, at the time. And he said, yes, of course, Sutherland's worked for the CIA. We can't touch him. We've got enough evidence to convict him 10 times over, but we can't touch him. And that's the story of the CIA drug operation all across America.
I published in my magazine here, and in my biker magazine almost 25 years ago, I published Colonel Edward P. Catolo's document on Operation Watchtower. He was in command of Operation Watchtower from his base in Ayer, Massachusetts. And they sent the special forces down to Columbia to build radio towers to bring planes. They brought 100 planes into Albrook Air Force Base, and the cargo was cocaine. From there, they were flown up to a little place in protected by the governor called Mena, Arkansas.
Yes, I've been with Terry Reed and his wife, and I've talked to them extensively about
Janice,
that.
a beautiful lady, yes.
And so anybody and everybody knows that Mena, Arkansas was used as a drop point. Have you also heard that they converted a parking meter factory to manufacture weapons so we wouldn't waste the empty plane going back? We could fill it with weapons to sell in Latin America?
Yes.
Well, as I said, conspiracy on top of conspiracy, not theory. Documentation, proven, and what I have to say is, wake up, America. Put your head on straight. It's your kids that are going to be suffering, and I'm afraid that this current recession, a double dip, is not really that, but it is the depression that they have been working very hard to bring upon us all. And unfortunately, I don't think we have much of a future over the next few years. And as you know, besides my film, Zielinski, and I'm told to spell my name in case they want to look me up, I'm all over the net, all over YouTube, Zielinski, and if you put that, www.Zielinski/film or film, you'll get that. If you put in American Genocide /Zielinski, you go to YouTube and see the one I did on the farmers in Iowa in 1991, and I did not believe that we were that cruel to the farm families in Iowa till I had a former Polk County deputy sheriff as a private investigator assured me that there was an ample document to back up what all three of these men were saying was being done to them. And I have tried over more than the last 20 years to reach out to whichever group had major problems and try to reveal that. And unfortunately in Iowa it was dismissal, nutcase, and so on. And down here I went to the Columbia Access people and started putting programs on, and that's when the two young guys latched on to me, and they spent 3 years putting that film together, and it's a hodgepodge. I mean, it's stuff that I had in the can from 1990 and 91, and we have just recently found the young man who helped me at the University of Iowa, and he says I have all the raw footage from early back then, which would allow us to put together some other things, including my America's MIA Children, Missing in America, Murdered in America, which I did. And I wanted also to mention the fact that I haven't stopped publishing just because they blacklisted me out in Iowa. I continued to issue a series of Amish heritage publications. My latest book is Amish Buggies Across America, and I'm in the process of trying to find a proper building in Jamesport, Missouri, a little Amish community where I can start an Amish heritage museum and put 48 years worth of photography on the Amish that went all the way back to the Canterbury in Switzerland and so on to completely document their history. Because I think the future lies not with modern technology, but what the Amish do in the way of successful farming using simplified methods, but no fertilizer, but by composting, manuring, and other things like that really enrich the soil. And I want to say that George Washington sent a committee to the Lancaster area after he became president to find out how the Amish and the Mennonites could grow so much crop when nobody else could.
You know, years ago, I mean, after I've been reporting, like you, I've been reporting on this for 20 years. I've been publishing for 25 years also. And they've gone after me economically. They've taken my advertisers away. They're trying to say I'm anti-Semitic, I'm a conspiracy theorist. The same thing that you're talking about, they've tried to do to me. And except they've also added in murder to that. They tried to keep me. They kept me in a hospital, drugged for 3 months. So my radio show went down. So the Free American magazine went down for 3 broken ribs. But right before, I mean, this all occurred in a 3-month time period when I exposed 9/11 as a, why did Building Number 7 fall, folks? Come on, think about it. And I also came out with the true face of FEMA in case of a single nuclear attack or an earthquake of significant proportions. We'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. But I also came out with, in the centerfold of my magazine, which was on Barnes & Noble's shelves and Books A Million and Borders, and I came out with the concept for Liberty Villages. I said we need to go back to the 19th century. Well, we need to grow our own food, generate our own energy. If we do that and we work together in a village setting with low-cost structures, teepees, yurts, cabins, mud huts, I don't care. Well, if we grow our own food and we generate our own energy, we don't need the government for nothing. And I think they tried to kill me over that. And I would have based that all the technology here that we need, the Amish have. And you've been telling people about that for how long?
For 48 years. I mean, I started as a student hitchhiking on my thumb down to Kelowna, Iowa. And my original idea was this: let me document these people before they disappear. And guess what? Not only have they not disappeared, but if you go across the United States, through the Midwest, through Kansas, through Missouri, through Minnesota, and so on, you're going to run onto Amish and signs that say, watch out for horse-drawn vehicle. And right now, every Amish area is in the process of conversion. They weren't any different than everybody else. They raised corn and soybeans and a few other things, and hogs and chickens and so on for themselves. But now they're heavily into growing vegetables and other things like that, because they've started farmers markets, produce auctions, and people from the